Our two-bedroom condo unit is coming along nicely, but it takes a little bit more than just walls, doors, and windows to make a typical building layout. So in this movie, we'll look at the component tool, which is the tool we use to bring in a variety of miscellaneous items. As a rule of thumb, if you don't see a dedicated tool for the item you're trying to insert, it's probably going to be under the component tool. So in other words, if I wanted a door or a window or a column, I have buttons for those, but I don't see a button for toilets or for furnaces or for washer dryers. So it's a pretty good bet that I'm going to find those items under component. It's sort of a catch-all button for all the miscellaneous items that you want to insert in a model. So when I click on the component tool, it'll take me to the Modify Place Component tab. And if I open up the list, you can see that what's loaded in my default template is a rather eclectic list. I have a desk, a parking space, and a tree. So as you can see, we really do have a variety of items to choose from here. However, none of the items on that list are the items that I actually want to add. So we're going to go right over here to Load Family, same as we did in the previous movie with doors and windows. And that'll take us to the standard out-of-the-box library. So you might want to familiarize yourself with the folder structure by spending some time looking around at what's provided here. So for the first item, I want to bring in a furnace for the utility room. So I'm going to go to the mechanical folder, and then there's a single folder in there, architectural, and then I'm going to choose an air side component, and finally the furnaces folder. The furnaces folder contains just a single family called furnace, so I'm going to select that. And I'm going to open it up. Now, you'll see the item appear directly on my cursor, and I can actually place it wherever I would like it to go. I call this a freestanding family because there's no restrictions on its placement. If you recall the previous movie where we placed windows and doors, those were actually wall-hosted families, and if you recall, unless your cursor was on top of a wall, you got the small little circle with a line through it. So if you see that sort of indication, it tells you that the object you're placing requires a host. But in this case, because I'm getting the symbol right away, it tells me this object does not require a host and I can just place it wherever I like. Now, like we've seen in other movies, I can tap the space bar and this item will actually rotate in 90-degree increments. Another interesting little trick that we can do is if your mouse happens to be highlighting something that's at a different angle, and then you tap the space bar, the object will actually match the orientation of that new object. So in this case, it'll match the angled wall. And if I tap it again, it'll rotate 90 degrees. And if I want to reset the rotation, I just move out into empty space and tap one more time, and I'm back to the standard rotation. So I'm going to spin it around this way, bring it over here, and place it kind of in this location right here in my utility room. Give it a little bit of room all the way around, like so. Now I'm going to stay in the component command, but I need to load a new component. So I'm going to go back to Load Family. And this time I want to scroll down here and locate the Specialty Equipment folder. I double-click that. Then I'm going to go into the Domestic folder. And in here, there's actually several items. So if I just click the first item and use the arrow key on my keyboard, I can scroll through and see that we have several items to choose from. Well, I'm going to need a washer and a dryer, so I'm going to select that. Washer, hold down my control key, select the dryer. I'm also going to need a range and a refrigerator. So with the control key held down, I'll select all four of those items and click Open. And it will load those four families into my project. When it's done, you'll see the last item I loaded. In this case, the range is on my cursor. I can tap my space bar to rotate it around, and then I'll place it over here. And notice that it will try and snap to the wall, so that's kind of handy. Change to a different item, like my dryer. Choose my size, spin it around, and I can place it right there. Choose my washer. Pick a size, rotate it around. See how it's trying to find the orientations here. I got to find a spot where it's not going to want to snap to an angle. There we go. Place it right there next to the dryer. And then finally my refrigerator. Now I'll just place that one like so. You can move that a little bit later. Let's load one more family. We're going to go to the plumbing fixtures folder this time. Architectural, and then fixtures, and then water closets, and I will find two versions of a domestic toilet. Now, there's a 2D version and a 3D version. Sometimes your choice here will depend on performance considerations. If you're doing a very large project, hundreds of thousands of square feet, adding a lot of 3D toilets can increase the file size and slow performance. In this case, we're doing a small condominium building and we only need a couple toilets, so I don't really think the difference would be noticeable. So if you want to use the 3D or the 2D, it's really up to you. I'm going to choose the 3D version, click open. And even though I've chosen the 3D version, let me just roll my wheel here and zoom in a touch. Notice that it still gives me a 2D symbol in plan view. So I'll show you the 3D view in just a few minutes and we'll see the difference there, but it still gives me a nice 2D version here in plan. I'm going to tap my space bar to rotate it around. Once again, it will highlight the nearby wall, space bar a couple times, and the nearby wall. So let me cancel out of this command, clicking the Modify tool. And I promised you a look at the 3D. There's a really simple way that we can check our progress here in 3D, and that is up on the Quick Access toolbar up here, the QAT. We can click this small little 3D house icon. It kind of almost looks like a little birdhouse, and we'll click on that. And that will take us into what Revit calls a default 3D view. Now, if I scroll down here on the project browser, we now have a 3D branch on our project browser. And if I expand that, the name of the default 3D view has these little curly brackets around here. So I often call this curly bracket 3D. Now, you can rename that if you want to, but that's just the default name. Now, navigationally, you have a couple ways you can spin this around and get a better look, because obviously we can't see really any of that equipment that we've just placed. So we maybe want to tip this down and peek inside a little bit more. You can use the view cube over here on the right-hand side, or you can just orbit the view actually using your wheel mouse. So in either case, let me show you both methods. If I come over here to the view cube and click and drag it, click, hold down and drag it, that's one way that I can spin this around. Now I'm dragging the cube, so I have sort of free-form motion here. If I drag the little circle at its base, this little turntable, that will spin in the model, but it will limit the height. It won't change the height, so it'll just sort of spin it around as if it was literally on a potter's wheel. Now, if you hold your shift key down on your keyboard and then drag with your wheel pushed in, you can kind of do a similar thing. So here you can see that's another way that I can orbit this around. And what I'm going to do is kind of tip it up a little bit so we can start to see down into here. If I roll the wheel forward, zoom in, there's the toilet in 3D, zoom back out, and then let me hold the shift and spin around again and kind of get a better look here. There's our washer dryer and our range and our furnace. So anytime you'd like to kind of see how things are shaping up in a 3D view, all you have to do is click that little birdhouse icon and then use one of the orbiting methods that I just showed you to spin around and get a better look at stuff. So anytime you need another component in your file that's not readily available, all you have to do is click the component tool, go to the load family, browse through your available library, and load in the components that you'd like to use. In the next movie, we'll look at other places where we can find content in online libraries. So that's another option that we'll have available to us.